morning, everybody. It is so good to have you here with me. Imagine
if you have your vision as the car with the right team.
Imagine how quick that vision will come into the footsteps. Something that was taking 5 years takes 3 months. This morning is all about the leadership and influence. Good day, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in again on This is the Inside Show. A warm welcome to you, and it's such a great honor and a privilege to have you with us in the studio. I'm here surrounded by wonderful men, and I'm not prejudiced because ladies are equally good, but today I'm here surrounded by a great guy. We're discussing the post-quarantine church, but before we get into the subject, I want you, please, if you don't mind, just to subscribe and then hit that bell there, because you will, every time when we come online, you will know that we are online. Well, this morning it gives me such great honor and privilege to welcome special guests, and in the studio I've got back here with me Pastor Wayne Shev, all the way from Raymond North. He is the pastor that's running campus ministries. There's such a lot that I would love to learn and hear from him. I think he must get a book out on campus ministry so that we can just develop that, and I think he needs to start getting lectures out on campus ministries. He needs to equip us and teach us exactly how to go about with campus ministries. I think that's his thing. Besides that, he's a wonderful preacher and a teacher as well. The man is just gifted. With me also Pastor Paul Gonzalez. I quoted him yesterday extensively in my show, and I blame him for all that 5 points that we discussed yesterday. A warm welcome to him. He's running a wonderful church here in the south of Johannesburg. Very successful, vibrant young guy, and it is so good to have him also in the studio. Pastor Paul, warm welcome. And then for the very first time with us on the show here today, I have here Dr. Jeffy Pereira, and it's such a great honor. We are friends for forever, and we're not going to give our age away, but I know him as when he was still young and handsome, and you know he's always left with what you see today. And that's what life is all about. And then just back to the post-quarantine church, and we're going to jump into that. People phoned last week and people begged me to bring this guest back, and what they didn't know is I asked them in advance already, and then they mentioned that we were in a rush. Truly, that was deliberate. The 9 points was set for the show, and it was so deliberate. And now from to this week onwards, we will start to unpack every single thing around it, and we're not going to do point 1, point 2, point 3, but I just want to run through the 9 things, and you will see it in the lowercase on your platform. I'm going to ask Roden Bora just to give us the 9 points that we discussed last week, and then we'll jump immediately into today's show. Roden Bora.
Thank you, Doctor. It's the 9 key changes for post-quarantine church. Number 1 is simplicity will be vitally important. Number 2 is only outwardly focused churches will survive. And number 3 was worship service gatherings will be smaller. Number 4, multi will multiply. And number 5, staff and leadership realignment will focus more on digital proficiency. Number 6, stragglers will become a subject of outreach and focus. Number 7, digital worship services will be newly purposed. Number 8, ministry training will change dramatically. And lastly, number 9, pastors will leave their lead positions for a second chair roles.
Yes, just on that one point, I remember Pastor Wayne here last week was very clear on that specific point. It doesn't mean that the leading pastor will take a secondary role within his ministry or within his call. It is just that there's others around you in the boardroom with more knowledge about digital churches, not digital churches, but rather with the multimedia platforms. So you should push most probably the millennials ahead and most probably Z's ahead, and let them just guide you within the boardrooms and allow them and trust them to guide you. The book that we're discussing again today is the Post-Quarantine Church of Thom S Rainer. And I tell you, there's not a lot on the net. And I was on a line with Pastor Paul Gonzalez this week, and I asked him if he could get to anything. Pastor Paul, what was your findings for this week on any new information around the Post-Quarantine Church?
Doc, thanks so much for having us on the show again, and to all our listeners, welcome. I've checked through, and like you rightly said, there isn't a lot that's going out there. There is some research, and Dr. Jeff and I had a conversation a few months back, and we revisited some of that and some interesting findings about, this change management process and the impact that it has on relationships. Because fundamentally, that's what it is. COVID has brought in some sort of community change management process that it has pressed upon us, and so we begin to see certain trends. And one of the trends that we've seen is that there's many people, a large percentage. Pastor Jeff can just help me again with the number. I think it was up to 30% of people that you've lost. Mm-hmm. They're not coming back. And I think that seems to be a significant area. Last night I was also reading just on a study that was done just on the perceptions of the church and the trust that people had with clergy. And I was fairly surprised and slightly disappointed that about 38% of people say that they trust their leaders' integrity. And that's 38. The balance of them, are on a scale of a spectrum from, somewhat trust to absolutely don't trust. And I just thought it's interesting during the time of COVID where we don't have relationships with people. They say that absence does make the heart grow fonder, but it also makes the heart grow further. If you're not regularly in contact with somebody, people can begin to draw their own conclusions. And so one of the things that would be interesting for me is that if people don't have such a high trust with clergy, in a time that we're going in COVID where you don't see your pastor, what are the thoughts that are developing in your mind concerning how he is? And I'll say one more point. Yesterday I spoke to a friend of mine, and you're talking about the 5 points that we had yesterday. We said just call in and check with your pastor. So if you have 40% of people that trust their pastors implicitly, but you have 60 to 65% that have some sort of not a distrust, but they don't really trust their integrity. Can you imagine if you're going through COVID as a pastor, your primary income is the church, and people have a negative perception of what you do with money? I was just trying to think about what is the mental and psychological impact it must be. There's one thing I just want to add on that. I'm very privileged to be able to have various streams of income. But if we this is a show where you said we keep it real and casual.
Exactly.
But there were months in this year, and I don't know if the other pastors can agree, where our income wasn't that great, where my wife and I couldn't take an income. Now, I could rely on a little bit of support here and there to see it through. But my heart went out to full-time pastors that are only depending on that. And once you've covered all the bills, there's nothing else left. And you've got kids, you've got bills, and you've got concerns. Now, couple this research that says that, there's this sort of low trust, and this is not a local study, it was done internationally. 60% of people have some sort of distrust. And couple that with the distance of COVID, and couple that with the strain on relationship, I must be honest, I'm feeling it a little bit for pastors right now.
You're not wrong. My brother himself is pastoring a church in Poch.
Yeah.
And yesterday, he's normally not a guy that will come online. And yesterday I was surprised that he was online. And he mentioned about churches that had to close down because there was not enough income. Specifically, people who rent. If you're not on time with your rent, within 2-3 months, the landlord will kick you out.
That's right.
And there's a lot of those churches out. And it's actually, my heart is actually bleeding. I tell you why, and I'm really in tune with you. My heart is actually bleeding because the communities that really attend those churches can't afford it. There's one income, and it's a genuine plague. The reality is real. The difference now, and guys, don't try to nail me on this one, but I just want to show you something. For where we are in this area, where we are, a Crystal Church, we are the only people of color surrounded by billionaires and millionaires in this area.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say, in essence, the owners of these companies go to a white pastoring church.
Right.
So they write one check.
Yeah.
We don't have that luxury. We have to build our own things. We have to sustain our own things, and that's hard.
Yeah.
And maybe I see Wayne, Pastor Wayne smiles. He's like, maybe you're right, or maybe you're wrong. You're wrong there. But I'm just, if that is a perception, he will correct it today for me. But I just want to get to Dr. Jeff here, because he's the first time in the studio here, and I just want Wayne to cool down on that statement, because he's the first time in the studio here today.
I can see what it's doing. It's trying to get me to have my train of thought crash. It's trying to make us believe that he actually fast and pray for a microphone. That's where he's driving at.
Just hold it there. I'm going to throw this ball at you, and then wherever your thumb lands, and you just answer the question that's there. This is almost like first day at school, it's like, you're part of our set for the first time. Let's welcome you into the set. So this is really a counseling ball, and then just to ease the atmosphere sometimes, but we don't need that. But still, I would love to do that. Okay, there's the ball coming, right? And what's the thumb saying?
Try to make someone laugh.
Right.
Now, that's the most difficult thing.
You don't
for
have
me.
to do much, though.
Yeah.
The reality is, I find it difficult to laugh. How can I make people to laugh?
I think the question was, you try to let yourself laugh.
Yeah, so I'm a very dry, humored guy. And so I don't know. I make my wife laugh, because you see, my wife, she's a dreamer, a real dreamer, and she can dream any time of day. And then what she does, sometimes she dreams that she's running on high buildings, and then she jumps off those buildings, and when she lands on the bed, there's like an earthquake.
Well, let's not go further then. Dr. Jeff, hold it there. You might start sharing stuff that we don't want to hear. Listen here, Dr. Jeff, give us a kind of introduction who you are, because the set knows Pastor Paul, and they also know Pastor Wayne, and they know Pastor Bora there. Tell us, who's Dr. Jeff Pereira?
Well, first of all, very few people know my real name. They only know my nickname. So, to set the record straight, I'm Clarence.
Yes.
And there's then the Jeff that I grew up with.
Yes.
That everybody knows. So that's the one aspect.
Listen, before you go, share that Jeff story and the Puff story, and that how your brother's in it.
Well, the thing is, it's almost like a cloudy occurrence, and the knowledge that we have is a bit cloudy as well. Apparently, my father, when Puff, the eldest brother, was born, it was cold like it is now, and it was in April. And so when he used to get that cold, he would go pff, pff. And how I got to get the name Jeffy was there was the Rhodesian sweepstakes, and the question was, give one word for instant, another word for instant, and so the answer is Jeff. And I was born during that time when he won the sweepstakes. He was the first black man in South Africa to win a Mercedes-Benz.
Sure.
And so that is where I then got that name Jeff. But where Snuff gets his one from,
It's Puff, Jeff, and Sniff.
yes. And the neighbors, they called us the dogs.
Okay.
Because it sounded like dog names.
Right, and all of you have different careers. Just tell me about Sniff, Jeff, and Puff. Your background, and you end with yours, and you just give us some information.
Yeah. Puff is actually a trained engineer, and he's now the principal of the Baptist Theological College. He holds a double doctorate in biblical studies and also in theology. And so he's the academic in the family. Snuff, he's the one that works the hardest of all of us. And he holds a B.Ed, and he also has an equivalent of a master's in project management. And then he's also the deputy director in the Department of Higher Education and Training. And then there's me. And I, in order of preference, I'm the bottom one. So I'm at the bottom of the food chain. And so, yeah, I'm a pastor and of AFM Victory Celebration. And then I was also in government for many years. And then I'm married to my cherry for 40 years. Yeah, the same woman. And so I thank God for that. We have 2 + 1 children. And when I explain that to people, 2 + 1, they're wondering about the 2 + 1. The one, they don't care about the 2, they care about the 1. And so they think maybe it's a child outside of marriage or from, so it's not. It's my sister-in-law's son that we raised. And so by all accounts, he's our son. And so, we have 7 grandchildren. That's 5 + 2, so you know where the +2 comes from. And then, I used to be in academics in my previous life. I hold a doctorate in education, specifically mathematics education. And I hold a master's degree in theology. I'm still registered for my PhD. Practical theology. And then I was also in the engineering space. I have a diploma in mechanical engineering, a diploma in building and construction, and then and a teacher's diploma.
That's great. This guy, I tell you, he's just got it all. And then he calls himself on the lower end of the chain. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Now you know who's our guest here today. And let's just get this program kicked up and start up here and running up. Wayne, any contribution? You know the 9 points. You can kick off at any point. Anything that triggers you, anything that you want people to know out there, anything that's a concern for you, through your lenses on any of the 9 points. Today we lay back and we can just hit any point that we'd love to.
Yeah, I was, first of all, good day to everybody that is watching. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thanks, Doc, for having me once again. I was listening very attentively when Pastor Paul was speaking, and I couldn't help it but just think about the other end of the spectrum, where we spoke about how finances are tight for ministers. And those who haven't innovated are actually in trouble. But if you actually take some few steps back, we will have to realize that now is not the time I'm talking for anybody, time to invest or time to put money aside. This is time for humanity. It's time for humanity, meaning that whatever that I have has to be shared. It's time for humanity. I look at us as a family. I'm not talking about the church. I'm talking about Wayne and Janice and the kids. We haven't been doing a lot of traveling. We haven't been driving our cars. We haven't been going out to the restaurant. So there is probably 800 Rand that is almost like a surplus if we are still keeping our salaries. When we go to Macro, we buy food in bulk and we break it into small packages, and that is given to families that we know, not even people in the street, families we know that have been laid off. And that is the church. Because a lot of people think that the church is a building. No, the church is not the building. The people are the church that goes into the building. Therefore, when they come back, you got to say to the people that welcome, the church is in the building now. So it's just a matter of saying that the church has to be effective now more than ever. And sadly, that hasn't been happening. It's like most of the churches have gone into a survival mode. How are we going to keep our buildings? how are we going to retain our congregation when everything else, like everybody's almost focused on reopening. So we're going to fight with the government to see when are you opening up the churches, when is the vaccine being rolled out. But it's time for humanity. That's number one, the point I want to raise. The second point I want to raise today is that there's going to be monotony when we come back to the building. Most of our congregations will get bored if we revert to what we used to do before the COVID. That is going to be one of the biggest challenges for ministers. Because people have gotten used to eating from a buffet. Like online, they go to Crystal Ministries, they go to Rema, they go to AFM, they go to the evangelicals, they go everywhere. Now, they come back to the church, and if the pastors don't innovate and don't find a way how to preach the gospel now to the place where it meets all the need, they're going to struggle, because people be like, you know what, this is not working for me. I've gotten used to doing A, B, C, D and watching that and that.
What's the challenge around that, if you look into that, Pastor Paul? Based on that what they will expect, specifically around the buffet and the choices that was out there and online. What do you think needs to change in the podium?
I think these are some excellent points. I just want to pick up on the one point that you raised, Pastor Wayne. I think the perception of people of the church being the building, there's another perception, and I think that perception is that the church is the leadership as opposed to the community. So you find that the perception is that it's the leadership that needs to drive the process. It's the leadership that needs to put together the meals.
Equip the sense.
It's the leadership that must... But the church is the community. And I think that one of the challenges that pastors have is establishing those vital relationships where people see themselves not only as recipients of what's happening, but passive contributors. I think about in the book of Acts, where you're talking about it's time for us to consider humanity, where the Bible talks about everybody brought what they had and laid it at the feet of the apostles, and it was dispersed accordingly that they could be enough for everyone. And I think that everybody aspect has got to be vitally important. And for me as a pastor, that's what I'm struggling with. I don't know if you pastors are having that. I'm trying to maintain a relationship with people that are not necessarily connected anymore. And I'm trying to ask myself, how far do I go to try and sustain? We're trying to create platforms where people can be connected and invested. Now, some are there, but they're silent. Others may or may not be there. So I'm on a kind of, let's wait and see who's there. I've got a lot of new people that are super excited. They are on everything that I do. They like everything. But there are people that I'm trying to get, and that's why I put out those 5 points is let us know we can't get to you. But in response to your question, it's precisely that sense of community that I think will circumvent this sort of consumption Christianity. In other words, I'm consuming from Furtick, I'm consuming from Jake's, and when I come to you, what can I consume? And I think that when we are focused on building community through maturity and instill within people that you're not coming to be serviced, you're coming because you belong. You see, I think that's the differentiating factor. And I think that that's part of the big challenge, and I say this respectfully, with some of the big churches, because a large part of how people structure their time is they structure, and I say this very respectfully, church like gym. You can be very committed to your local Virgin Active down the road. You have a relationship, you know the guys. But if it closes down, you kind of like, I miss my gym. And those people. And I think if you structure church like that with the bigger churches that can't really have those intimate relationships, people do miss going to that, but they may move on when they find community. So my focus on is to say, and we're using this word deliberately, family. Family, we are getting back together again, because I'm not here to perform to you. I'm here to walk with you, and we're here to build as a community. So I have an expectation, like any relationship, that you will do your part and I will do mine.
Exactly. You know, I would love to bring Dr. Clarence.
Who's that? Who's that? Is he in the studio?
I would love to bring him in here. On any of one of those 9 points, is there any point that you want to piggyback on and most probably just help us on the post-quarantine church? What can we expect when we come back?
Well, the issue of simplicity, I think, is a very important one. But when I look at what Thom Rainer is saying here, he's saying we have to scale down. The complexity of pre-COVID must now be re-looked at. And, where people were burnt out, leaders and all of those things. But I don't know who's he addressing. Is he addressing a almost a what can I call it? And I don't want to offend any church, but almost like a traditional way of doing church, because he's asking us for scaling down. And when I look at my context, we did that 6 years ago, where we basically said what is unnecessary. You know, the sisters meetings, and then the brothers meet separately, and then this team meets, and then that team meets, and he says there's this competition for the calendar, and I'm thinking in my context, what do I make more simple? Is it the Stephen Furtick-like sermons, you know, to make it more palatable for the people? Or is it the what's this guy in Houston?
Joel Osteen.
Joel Osteen. Or is it, you know, that storytelling of Joel Osteen? What do I make simpler? Is the word too complex? Or is, and this is just responding to you, Pastor Wayne, do we begin to conform with people's tastes? Is that a good thing, or is it a bad thing? And for me, I'm in between. I because it speaks to this consumerist behavior of the people. And so who are the people that we saw, the 32% that has gone, that's never going to come back to church? And he's saying those people are now on those digital platforms. And I'm asking, why did we lose them? What could we have done to retain them? We've done everything that we could in terms of our house churches, keeping contact. We're having different groups, WhatsApp groups, and all of those other beautiful things. We, you know, when we minister, we minister on online platforms, and then for those people who don't have the data, we even put the audio sermons on WhatsApp. And yet, even in all those efforts that we've made, people seem not to be responding as we expect them to.
Yeah, just for a while, can we stay on the simplicity side?
Yeah, that's a good
so
point.
the simplicity side is most probably a good side. Remember, there's 9 points, and we said we're just going to hang loose, and we're just going to discuss it. So simplicity in its holistic form, meaning right from worship, right to preaching, to announcements, to the hubs that we have, what we call iHub, the car park. What is it that he really singles out as what should we do more simpler? And I know Dr. Pereira mentioned something interesting around how he had to adjust, or he asked a question about, must the preaching change? Must this change? What is it that we need to serve the people differently? Because he's not really what word can I use there? He doesn't explain himself in detail in the book around simplicity. He doesn't pin it. I reckon the reason for that is for different countries, different places.
Sure.
That's and even the 30%, I'm not even sure if we will lose 30%.
Yes.
And that's a question. What will your take be, Pastor Paul?
I think, Doc, what's important is what do you want to achieve with your people? I think the end goal will determine the activities. What is it what is the outcome? That are you just trying to sustain them in that place? Are you trying to mature them? Because I think what your goal is will determine, what your strategy will be. I also think that it's easy for people to leave an activity, but it's hard for them to leave a relationship. And I think that the point you're making, Doctor, is very important, because when people come back, I'm thinking, okay, do we scale down, Doc? Do we just say we're not doing much? But then people are saying, we've been scaled down for a year and a half. We want a concert. We want to connect with our brothers and sisters. We want the brothers meeting, because we haven't done that. So in the definition, I think it's broad. Finally, you've raised a very valid point in that country dynamics are very different. We were talking about the outward church and the outward focus. Last week, we didn't get to make this point. But the point that you are asked is, what is the difference in dynamic? And I think I'm speaking broadly and generally, generally, that in America you've got your white churches and your black churches. And, you find your predominantly white churches, it's got the sort of activity experience where people come. But black churches have always been involved and entrenched in their communities. And again, I'm speaking very generally. So they have always been running the feeding schemes and the basketball courts, because those were largely impoverished places. And so I think when we open up and we talk about simplicity, do we go back to community as simplicity? He's largely referring to activities, I think. He's saying don't have a ton of activities where your leaders are burnt out. But I do think you can have a ton of activities where you can rebond and re-find each other. I haven't seen you. I don't know. Any other points on that?
I think to a large extent, what Thom is actually saying in his book, when he speaks about simplicity, that's why he didn't actually define it for us, because it differs in every context. And I think that when he speaks about simplicity, there could be probably 5 other points that he's making there. But I think the one I want to pick on is the one that, for example, let's say we now going to be faced with a reality that we have an online audience and a physical audience.
Yes.
So we're going to have to cater for the people in the building, but also not forget those that are online. So the simplicity part of it is that we're not going to be caught up in having our auditoriums be filled by 5,000 people. And we still want to find ways on how to get people into the building, and neglecting the fact that we could have a potential 5,000 that is not even limited in terms of space online. So how to simplify stuff is that if you have a conference and you have 2,000 people in the auditorium that sits 7,000, but you have 8,000 people watching online, you are still effective. So, but most people would rather have 7,000 in the building, because for them, it's almost like they enjoy the feedback that is coming to them as a pastor, as a leadership, But when you look at even the giving, 8,000 people can give online. If you say, okay, it's a free conference, but it's 10 Rand or it's 30 Rand for you, to help us pay some of the bills we have here physically, you are still winning. So he's pushing us to think outside the box. Now, remember last episode, and people got to check it out. We said the word of God doesn't change. It's progressive revelation. It was true then, true now, it will be true tomorrow. But the methods we use to transmit this message will always change, more especially now. We have to be innovative. That's another point. That simplicity means that we're going to have to innovate. What if you've got a prayer night and you want 1,000 people there, but you only have 200 people and the rest are watching or be part of that online? Is that a win or a gain for the church or a loss? It is a win, because it's a mandate. Go ye out there and make disciples. My last point I want to make with that is that we see something amazing now for churches in terms of diversity. We speak about black and white church. I'm sure most of us, when we've been online, we have attended white churches, black churches, Indian churches, different colors and creeds. That's the upside of online church, that you actually get to get into a place of worship without actually being conscious of your color, because you are in an online space. If you walk into a white church, I've had that experience when I was in Randfontein, and I walked into a church. I just wanted to worship then, and I felt immediately that I could probably be in the wrong place here. But if I want to go to a church that is Afrikaans speaking, polish up my Afrikaans, I walk into an online service, I won't feel that. That is the upside of online. So that is the simplicity. Inclusivity comes because of the simplicity we're talking about here.
Can I mention something on this? And I think you're absolutely spot on in that we've seen also online you're reaching a lot more people. I was talking about this new members that are so enthusiastic. Doc, you told me months ago, I've mentioned that last week, that a lot of those people followed you online and then they ended up joining the church. But I think that Dr. Jeff will agree that the one concern that we'll always have with pastors with an online is the issue of accountability. How do we measure your growth? And I think you raised it last time. If people don't like you, they move on. So they'll cater their taste to something that affirms their position, but not necessarily convicts their reality. And I think that that's where that accountability aspect is, that when you see people on a regular basis, when you talk about this sort of simplicity, that relationship dynamic is ultimately what church is about, more than the service experience.
Hey, we are here on the Inside Show. I've got wonderful guests here with me, Dr. Pereira here with me, Pastor Wayne Chef here with me, and I also have here Pastor Paul Gonzalez here with me. We're talking about the Phygital Church, and this word, sometimes a tongue-twisting word, is the digital part connecting with the physical part, but this is that connection, and that's exactly what Pastor Wayne mentioned, and then Pastor Paul, wonderful contribution. Now, the accountability side, I want to ask Pastor Pereira, just on the Dr. Pereira, on the accountability side, because it's easy to win somebody online. You can call it even digital evangelism. You can call it online evangelism. And I know somebody that's a good friend of mine did some doctorate some years back, maybe 3-4 years back, on the digital church, and didn't even know that this will come. I was trying to find it. I will phone in to find out if that thesis was really done and so on, because I just kind of know that they were busy with that. So what I'm really saying here today is that it's okay to have the digital side, but how do you connect the two? And that's the challenge that we have. How do you bring them through for baptism? How do you bring them through sometimes for classes? Classes are easy. You can do that online. But it's that physical touch. And how do you build culture and so on and so on? What's your take on that accountability side?
Well, for me, that is big, and I think Pastor Paul and I had a conversation about this. If people are freelancers and they hop from one platform to another, in essence, who holds them accountable for their growth? Because what is the mission of the church? If we go back to the true mission of the church, the true mission of the church is not to have bums on seats. It's the quality of those bums on those seats. And the issue is, and here's the test, how do we make disciples? And what is a disciple? A disciple is someone who has been mentored and coached by, let's say, a pastor or a leader, and who have matured in their relationship with the Lord. And they are then able to multiply themselves in others. And that is why Apostle Paul said, "Be ye followers of me, even as I am of Christ." So it is, and it's this thing that you've been harping on, Pastor Paul, the issue of relationships, because it is within those relationships where accountability is called upon, is demanded. And the thing is this, I think, for me, and you've been harping on this thing, for me, relationship, the church is about relationships. Relationship with God, relationship with man. And so it's those relationships. To be an online participant, just listening to the sermon, there's no real relationship. You're having a relationship with a platform.
There's an interesting side to this. I see Pastor Wayne is laughing down on the other side, but there's an interesting side to this. One person mentioned, and I think it was Xavier on the set the other day, and I don't know where he picked it up. He quoted Pastor Paul. I'm not sure why he mentioned it. I can't even remember, was it upstairs in my office or whatever. But they mentioned about somebody that go online, just to let the pastor know that he's online, and then just put a phone down and go watch a movie, to give you the impression that, well, I checked in, I'm there. And that's the difference. And I must just admit, it's really challenging times to connect the physical and the digital side. What's your take on that, Wayne?
Doc, I want to just move 2 steps back before I crash my thoughts. We spoke about simplicity. One of the issues that which a lot of churches will experience is the issue of membership, because we want to know how many members we have. And we say if we got 10,000 people as part of membership, when you have a conference, you expect a full house. But now and then during the show, you keep on saying to people, hit that bell. And people subscribe to your channel. What is that? That is membership. If they choose to follow you, means that every time you come on, they get a notification that, hey, Dr. Hendricks is about to get lit up in this place. That's membership. Because we don't follow channels that we don't interested in. Okay, that's number one. So the issue of membership will be key, because we're gonna have to ask ourselves, what is membership? Will you require membership, for you to be part of a church? To a certain extent, as Dr. Clarence is saying, that there's an issue of relationship, because you don't just go burying people across the city. You normally look after your people who are in the database. You know where they are. You know who's next of kin. You sort of like have a short history of who they are. Therefore, maybe membership in that regard would be essential. Now, I don't know to what extent communism will actually be a big thing moving into the digital space, where you can say, okay, someone has died who is a part of the AFM church, but they're in Cape Town. I don't need to travel to Cape Town. There's an AFM branch in Cape Town who can do the funeral for us. Then the other issue also becomes, I just want to piggyback on what you're saying, is that when we speak about accountability and relationships, we have situational relationships, short-term relationships, and long-term. If I meet someone in the plane, we connect, I share the gospel with them. That is just a situational. We were in a situation, I end up doing what I was supposed to be doing. Then there's those that you meet maybe for 6 months, you build a relationship, and there are those that are in town and they come to your church for a long time. We're going to have to really look. That's why innovation is going to help us to disciple these people. So if we're still worried about having people in our churches and they got to be rooted in our churches, they got to grow with us, then we are neglecting a larger part of people out there that still needs us. So somehow there's going to have to be innovation to make sure, yes, we look after the people that are committed to coming to the building, but there's also another group of people that needs to be discipled. We have to innovate as a church. That's one of the biggest challenges.
I think I just want to come in here and just echo what you're saying. That is absolutely true. We have to innovate. And for me, and this is one of the things that I've been thinking about, how do I disciple those very people that are online, that I have a platform relationship with?
You see, that is going to be very hard for a lead pastor. That means we're going to have to employ or create another department called an online pastor who is responsible for creating digital material for them. Let them enter into a virtual classroom. Like what has happened here.
I understand that. Sorry to barge in there. No, I understand. It is also in his material. Yeah. And so my question is, how do I connect, whether it be me personally or how do I employ someone to serve or service that space, that digital space? So I'm grappling with that, and then I think I am I'm in support of a hybrid model. So although I disciple online, I must also make sure that there is physical contact, because it's in that physical contact, because they're not going to be baptized online.
Yeah, we're on a good track here, and I like what I hear, because it's exactly that Phygital Church. Because there's the two sides. There will be in the new church, and I don't know, I don't want to give it a new name, but stick to the Phygital Church. In the new church, I reckon there will be a group of people that you have to pastor from a distance.
Yeah.
And there will be people that you'll have to pastor right here, because every person and it will be based, and it's open for discussion, and I like the way it's going, and I like the way you have a view and you have a view. It's good. I think I'm going to be here in the center and just throw the liver out there. But what I'm saying in general is that it seems like we need to learn stuff. When you mention something interesting, I would love to look into that, to get somebody on. Our church, we have a strategist on board. There's just a handful of churches that think of getting a strategist on board. We have an administrator on board, and we have pastors on board, and we have, as forever, videographers on board, and graphics on board. So kind of God prepared us in that direction. But what I really, really realize, that we don't have the staff, even now, to oversee people from our office and get into their houses, even your own congregation. It's hard to do it from a single pastoring position, lest somebody have a specific role just to do that. But it must be a spirit-filled person that can pastor online.
If you look at the Bible, Paul is a prime example of somebody that had.
I'm just naughty now. You like to quote Paul, and you know, every time for obvious reason. Every time you say on our last show, he said, "No, as Paul is also saying there." It's like, okay, which Paul? Which Paul?
The man wrote 2/3 of the.
No, you cannot.
No, I can't speak about myself in the third person. I know there are people that speak about themselves in the third person.
We have to be clear. That's why
if I say apostle, I've already been ordained by these two men as Apostle Paul as well.
Even
Paul
talk
of
about
Tarsus.
Jesus. You have to specify which Jesus. Because
Let's talk about Paul in the Bible. He had, I wouldn't want to call it a Phygital Church because there wasn't the technology, but the apostolic engagement and relationship that he had with the churches in Ephesus and Thessalonica and all, he wasn't physically, he birthed them and then he wrote to them. So, that was a medium of communication to say, this is how I think you are. So there's an example of somebody that had a long distance. But in the hybrid, he had local pastors. Because there's got to be, it's hard for me, and maybe it's my old school thinking, to think about the discipleship model that doesn't carry some level of accountability and interaction. And when I think about also, I just have a few thoughts. I don't want them to sound scattered, but in any other relationship, because I think a standard has got to be measured across different examples. So for example, can you build a meaningful relationship long term, a love relationship with your partner, just being digital? And what is the limit? So if you take it out of a church context and you ask yourself, what is the level of intimacy that we can build just being online constant? And you'll find that there is a gap, but there is a necessity for a hybrid. This is what I think is important from my perspective in terms of where we find ourselves. It's the outcome, and the outcome is the maturity of the saints. So the reality right now is that people are struggling. The Bible talks about the testing of your faith. The reason why we teach is to make sure that you grow in your understanding of who God is. And we're not just teaching you like any other platform. We're instilling a value system, and we are also instilling within you a Christ-likeness. The asset test for those that are watching right now, you've been on a digital platform. How has your spiritual growth been? Compared to when we were meeting? Are you still good with the Lord? Are you growing with the Lord? Do you find yourself even more intimate now that you're spending time on those platforms? Because the reality of the test is, no matter what your appetite is, it's about how much deposit is on the inside. So when the time of testing comes, can you stand? So I'm good to say I've got 500 members that don't come to the church. But Paul talks, the Apostle Paul of Tarsus says, and maybe you can help me with this, I haven't read it in a while. He says, you are my investment. In other words, you are what I will account for in heaven. And that is why he has taken a personal responsibility. I can't take personal responsibility for members that just come onto a platform that I don't have more of a relationship with. And finally, the relationship is not mutually inclusive in the sense that I'm listening to you. The only thing that is happening is that you're listening to me. So I'm ministering a sermon to you. But in a church, I know who you are. And I'm trying to get you, I've got your voice in my ear as well. So I'm saying, how do I take John from A to B, because I can see that he's stumbling here. But if John tunes off every time I touch a sore point that's necessary for his deliverance or growth, then I can't fully develop John as a believer. I can only speak to his moment. And finally, I find that a lot of that speaking is more affirmation and also intriguing. It's not necessarily building. What I mean by that is, does this guy make me feel good in this moment when I listen to him? But when we get to the meat of the word, I don't like what I'm hearing right now, but that's where the true change actually happens. And your flesh will fight against it.
And that's the challenge, before Wayne comes in. That's the challenge that we have. Every single person around this table, for some reason, you plan the year. And you better plan the year, I would love to believe, and I'm speaking to myself. You better plan the year in such a way that when you start with a congregational member in January, that you need to know what will the deposit be by December.
Yeah.
in that congregation, which means we call it series. So we
Yes.
preach in a series.
Yes.
But that series is designed deliberately.
Yes.
It's designed so that you may grow in faith, you understand
That's
the
it.
Trinity, and the down part of the digital church
Yeah.
is that a person that needs help in a specific area
Yeah.
will not necessarily follow you during that series because it's not important, and he will find another buffet pastor
Yeah.
to follow. So I'm not saying in essence, and this is the discussion, I'm not saying in essence that's all wrong. But what I'm saying is this is the beginning of dialogue.
Doc,
We're coming back. You go.
I just want to creep in because I don't want to take too much time, but before COVID, we had a strategy of 7. We were going to give people 7 people for 7 months. But the goal is, because when we were running home cell, we found that people are growing in fellowship, but they're not necessarily maturing in faith or discipleship. They love meeting on a Thursday. It's good for them as a cycle, but we're not growing this thing. And so we said, no, I'm going to give you 7 people. In 7 months, those people must be like you. They must take on the ability to take 7 other people and do the same. And that was that discipleship process that we're referring to. I've got to take you from point A to B. I can't meet with you on a weekly circular to just affirm your spirit. I want to be able to see that you're growing. There must be a trajectory for growth.
Now, on that point, when you're coming in there, on that point, must you have, in a digital church, must you have a shepherd that you're accountable to?
Most definitely. Look, I am now at the point where I'm just going to throw the cat among the pigeons.
Okay.
I think we've been speaking, because this is elementary stuff that we are touching on. We haven't even scratched on the, we're just scratching on the surface. For example, I love the conversation we're having with Dr. here, Dr. Clarence, because he's touching something that I'm very passionate about, discipleship. There can only be accountability where there is discipleship. No one can be accountable to you if you are not discipling them. So when we speak about the whole online church congregation members, these people have to be discipled. And the question that seems to be lingering in the room is like, how do you do that? I have done an online comfort service. I have done a funeral online. I have done a wedding online. Last week, Wednesday evening, Xavier was driving home. He went on Instagram Live, IGTV. He invited me in. We were having a conversation about vaccines in front of our 10,000 people who follow us. They were all listening to what we're saying and making comments. But this is a private conversation that I'm having with Xavier.
That's good.
And people are listening to us. Now, this is not scripted. This is just us venting about stuff, opinions, where God fits in the whole thing. That is something that you don't need to call a meeting to have people to engage. Like you're going to be talking about the vaccine probably in 2 weeks from now. But we had that conversation already, not filtered, So if I want to disciple people who are in a home cell, maybe it's a family, what I do, if they've got a smart TV, I log on, they log on, their TV's got a camera. I see 7 or 8 of them in the room. I minister to them, I ask questions, they speak to me, all that kind of stuff. It's the same thing. The only difference is that we are not at the restaurant eating something and drinking something, which I know they will pay at the end because I'm the pastor. So they are saving money actually being at home and being online. That is discipleship. I get to meet with them weekly without fail because I'm at home. I can meet them at 9 until 10. I don't need to drive back home. So if you can have people within the church, within your ministry, that will say, you know what, I'll take the 7 people you're talking about. And that's how I'm going to disciple them until we are able to meet. As a matter of fact, some of us will never go back to the physical meetings in terms of having meetings.
Agreed.
The online meeting is more productive than the physical one. It's proven. You don't need to buy eats for anybody because that's a church culture that when we meet, you need to break literal bread. You need to eat. People need to drive there. So people, then they leave work at 6 or 5. They don't need to rush for a 7 p.m. meeting. We can meet once a month for fellowship.
And training will also change drastically.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't
but
need
there's
it.
also records. If you miss something in a meeting, most of the times it's gone. But this time around, you've got a video that has been saved that you can listen to. So, but there's going to take what we were talking about last week, that there's going to have to be extensive training of your. There's going to be change management, which Pastor Paul's talking about, that needs to happen within ministries to say, we are no longer where we used to be. So I'm saying that if you're a minister and a pastor who is obsessed with numbers in the building, it's going to be a challenge.
And that is exactly what the Phygital Church is all about.
Yeah.
It's about change. You are tuning to the Inside Show. I would love you to do me a massive favor. Just hit that subscription button and hit the bell. So every time when we come on, you will know that we are on. I've got in the studio a wonderful man here. And at this point in time, I would just want to bring the views in of Dr. Clarence here. And I would love him just to, from his perspective, any point that you'd love on the 9 points that's out there. Is there any contribution that you'd love to bring? It doesn't matter which point it is, because we are really open for it. And I like the way we go here, and I like the way you're coming from. What's actually happening here, as we discuss, we find answers for ourselves. The truth is, we don't have the answers.
Absolutely.
That's right.
But we need to venture into it. We need to put a dipstick in and see exactly what's happening out there. Dr. Clarence, what do you say?
Well, Dr. Carl, for me, in my context, when I listen to these young men, I understand what they are saying. I need to do what they are saying, and the issue of being able to communicate through people live and interact with them via the smart TV is excellent. I would do that anytime. But look at my context. We are in Rosettenville. The people in our congregation can't even afford. They don't even have
Smartphone.
not the smartphone. No, I'm not even talking about the smartphone. I'm just talking about data.
Data, yeah.
They don't even have data. In fact, many of them don't even have bread. We had to spend in excess of 60,000 rand during the lockdown just to feed God's people. And so I'm thinking, how do I best serve them where they are? In your high-end churches, in your high-end communities, it's easier to do that. What does Jeff do in Rosettenville? And that is the thing I'm grappling with. And we've been exploring a number of options. Do I buy data for all my leaders? For example, my village leaders, my shepherds, for the house churches. And then what do they do for their flock? Do they have to buy data for their flock in order to communicate with them? And so what is the cost of that? And I did just a cursory investigation.
You know what? I would love you to share more. I tell you why. There's a lot of communities out there, and what the apartheid called townships. There's a lot of township churches out there. People that's locked in communities, and that's the reality. And really, just share a little more about that, because you venture into that. I might come from a different angle, and you come from a different angle, but this is a good point of departure. It's helping somebody out there. Go ahead.
So I'm trying to find a way of effectively servicing the needs of these people. And how do I keep them for the Lord? Because the Bible says He came for these people. The lost, the poor. And He says to us, you'll always have the poor amongst you.
Exactly.
And I know them personally. I know their names. So it's for me, it's this in-person vis-a-vis the online battle for me. You know, so we have those members who can afford what we are talking about.
Can I turn to what you call the young man here? I don't know where you place me, but I would love to be on this side. But nevertheless, I would love to turn to them, because there is a reality out there, and you might just sit with some answers here. What do you think? What should Dr. Pereira do? What's the approach there? Because the poor will be with us, and they don't have data, and then the elderly, the generation, the baby boomers, and the access. Some of them don't even have proper phones. What's your take? And I know the struggle is the connection between the physical church and the digital church.
Yeah, I'm so glad Dr. Jeff brought that point, because what it continues to highlight is that there's no one size fits all. That church is on a spectrum that's infused with cultures, that's infused with various demographics and various dynamics. And I think that the Phygital Church is not an either or. I think the physical part of the Phygital Church caters for scenarios such as that. And I think that what Pastor Wayne was saying is absolutely true. In your discipleship process, if you have the members that can, it's the same effect. I certainly don't want to go back to have physical leadership meetings if all my leaders can come on board. But there are some sensitivities. That's what I'm sensing that we must be mindful of, that we don't feel that because some are by the means and some aren't, some get excluded purely because they can't. Because I think that sensitivity is very important. And you're true, data can be a major challenge. The fact that people can't sit and do the smart screen TV can be a major challenge. So I think that, you know, every pastor's got to look at what his reality is, which is the most basic and obvious advice, and say, you know, the more phygital for me than digital, maybe WhatsApp, that could work, but more physical than digital, that will work much better. I think that's my 2 cents worth on it. I think just on the point of even your members, there's a spectrum. And when I was listening to Pastor Wayne talk, I realized that there are people that will follow you that are members, but they're not really members of your church. They're actually just following you. And there's I think the thing we as pastors should always say is go and find a church where they can know your name, not just where you know our names. But you're right, we can minister to those people on some level, and then the people that are your members, it's easy to balance it out. But this is a very important point that I think we need to discuss.
I want to comment on what you're saying, and also I'm going to go to Dr. Clarence there, because I think what he raised is actually, it exists in every church, whether it's high end or not. But when we speak about online church doing it effectively, let's say you have someone that is just in charge of looking for people online and how you follow that up. After Dr. Carl has preached an amazing sermon on a Sunday, and there's someone or a group of people that are interacting with people as he preaches, because there's always comments. Come Monday, you're coming back to your 9 to 5 in the office. That person then inboxes the people who are commenting. Hi, how are you? We saw that you were part of the service last Sunday. How was your experience? Where do you stay? How can we help you? You know, that type of thing. That's the kind of follow-up that you're doing. So you don't do church on Sunday, then you comment and you respond to people and it stops there. You follow them up. That you have 7 days in a week to follow them up. To say, hi, how are you? You asked for prayer online. And I know we prayed for you, but we would like to know exactly what is going on so we can just keep you in prayer. You have built a relationship already.
Yeah, I've actually had that experience online. Years ago, I went on to, I think it's Rock International, not affiliated to us. And you comment, and there's somebody that's an online pastor that monitors everything that gets said. And immediately they do inbox you and things like that. And it's a nice touch.
Same thing, like you said, hi, we saw you online and you commented and you said, no, you love what's happening. Have you given your life to the Lord? Yes, I have or I haven't. It's like, it's happening. When I go on Instagram Live, which is every Tuesday evening, so when you are there, you have 100 people watching live. You come after 2 days, there's 3,000 people who have watched your sermon. Then you begin to get your inboxes. Hi, Pastor, that was a powerful word. That was just a word for me. Then you say, hey, where do you stay? No, I stay in Sanning. No, I'm in Soweto. Where in Soweto? I'm in Jabavu. Oh, okay. Where do you go to church to? No, I'm not going to a church. So because of the COVID, I'm just going to watch you until I find a church. Okay, great. It's almost like you know the person.
Sure.
You know? So that's one side of online church discipleship and accountability. Now, going back to Dr. Clarence, I love what you bring, because even in our church where I fellowship, we have that problem where we have, maybe like 55% of the people who have the smart TVs, they have smartphones. That is not an issue. But there's those multi sites where you put that classroom in that area and people come and watch via a big screen. These are the people that won't physically be able to come to your building. That's why you are meeting them where they're at, meeting them at the point of their need. They don't have data at this point. Let alone they're struggling just to put food on their table. How do you then, as a ministry or a pastor, reach out to these people? That's when innovation comes from. So every time we speak about innovation, we are all thinking it have to be digital and high-end digital. But I'm saying, where you are and where most pastors find themselves, what can they do? Do they print tracts? Do they do the whole 3 months Bible reading strategy, where you said, this is how you're going to read your Bible? then you put your comments as the pastor. So you print maybe 1,000 of those, you give them to your leaders, they give them to the people. It's another way of being in contact with your people, because they can be part of the digital experience. But there is something that the ministry is doing to show that, hey, we understand where you're at, and we are making an effort as a church to make sure we reach you. So there are so many things that we can do. But it's like, okay, what are those things? That's why a team comes to make the dream alive. To say, okay, fine, how can we specifically look for after this family here?
Can I just explain what we do? What we do, we have what you're saying. We have a year Bible reading, a Bible reading plan for a whole year that we already published in November of the previous year. And so what we do, we ask them in their groups to share their quiet time. And the quiet time is basically composed of what is God saying, or the Holy Spirit or Jesus, what warnings are given, what encouragement, what are we to avoid, what sin must we deal with, and then we have the application part, where that application is based on what they have read. In other words, if there is a sin that I must deal with, then I will say, from today, I have neglected to read my Bible. But here the Word of God is telling me that I must eat the Word of God. And so this is my nourishment. And I commit from today, I will read my Bible every day. Something like that. And then there's a prayer that goes with it. So in other words, there's that structure that we have provided for, both in terms of, and then what we do, we then comment on their postings, their contributions. And so that is how we also keep in touch with them. The other thing that we do with a Bible study, for example, during lockdown, we had our Bible study, and then we did it via Skype, and then obviously, you know, the Wi-Fi is up and down and lots of problems. Yeah. In the end, I had to go to WhatsApp and teach online via WhatsApp. And then afterwards, that was a problem too, because it was data intensive. I then had to use my telephone with my, my airtime and go on to, what do they call these, where I can... Conference call. I had to teach via conference call. Now, a group of 15, I can only go on with 5 other people. So in other words, that Bible study that would have taken just 2-3 hours is now taking 9 hours. It's because I have to divide them up in those groups because they cannot afford it. And so I use my resources in order to reach them and to disciple them through the word, but also hold them accountable.
Dr. Clarence, it pained me to hold you there. Unbelievable. We're done with an hour. And time, I don't know what happened to that. And it seems to us what to discuss next week. And then I'm going to ask the gentleman that's on the set, most probably to ask their congregation on their platforms, what is it that you don't understand about the Phygital Church? Yeah. And what's your questions about the Phygital Church? Are we fair? Are we unfair? What's through your lenses? And so on. The one thing that I want us to touch on, and I'm going to give Pastor Wayne some homework here. You know where we struggle as Crystal Church is on with the TikTok generation. The one side is the digital side. They very, 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 very verbal. They're in your face, and they also the cancel. They're also in the cancel culture. They're good with those things, and you know what they did with the elections just the other day in America. So we don't know how to tap into that generation, and that's really a concern for me as a pastor of this organization. So I'm saying at the end, this platform this is week 2. Then we have 3 and 4. We promise that we'll go 4 weeks through this, and we try really to get in there. And just offset, Pastor Wayne, if you don't mind, share a little more about, because you rave out, we are just scratching the surface, which is true, but that 9 points are out there. What is it that we need to get into, the meaty side or beyond scratching surface? Well, I just want closing remarks from everybody, and then we out here. Wayne, just closing remarks from today. In 30 seconds, what will you give as a closing remark?
I think anyone who is in ministry right now, their hearts are pure, their hearts are right, their hearts are in the right place. What we gotta do is just innovate and allow, the innovation master, who's the Holy Spirit, to lead us where the people are at, so we can minister to them, either physical or digital. Doesn't matter. God is gonna lead us.
Dr. Clarence.
Well, the thing is, for me, it is to allow myself to explore the deeper digital opportunities. I have not been left behind. I have tried to keep up. And so I need to further explore. It's just, for me, in my mind, how do I get a member of staff of the current crop? Maybe not. How do I get a specialist? Where do I get the resources from?
And it exists. I tell you, there's a lot, and I'm sure Pastor Paul, myself, and so on, we can really sit around the table and discuss that. The availabilities are just huge, and we will most probably explore that a little more after the set. But I'm also mindful that you're going on to a call, a business call now at 10:30, so I need to get you out here. But from my side, I just want Pastor Paul to give me closing remarks, and I just want to thank you again for coming and your availability.
Thank you so much, sir. I think my 30 seconds I just want to spend talking to pastors that are watching the show and looking at this amazing setup and wondering, will we ever get there? I think for those pastors, I want to encourage you, just do the next thing. You know, if you haven't been on WhatsApp, just do the WhatsApp thing. You don't have to go into, this is state of the art, this is next level. TikTok and all of those things are fantastic. But sometimes you can feel very overwhelmed if you see all of these things, and especially because it hasn't been part of your flow. I think what they have to say for their congregations, they want to hear, just get to the next step. And then secondly, in your church, there's a youngster that's irritating everybody with his Facebook habits. He's the guy you must look for.
Yep.
Wonderful.
That's it.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well, we are with the Phygital Church. There's no doubt. Remember last week when we closed the set with when the cloud moves.
Yep.
God is not going to wait for you. When the cloud moves, and I just want to admire Dr. Clarence here, and
You can still call me Jeff.
Yeah, I just want to admire Dr. Clarence. I'll call him Jeff offset. I just want to admire Dr. Clarence here. You know what? There's a lot of pastors, and I don't. You just lingering over 60, but all I'm saying, there's a lot of pastors out there that really don't know what to do, and they still pastoring, and their congregation still love them. And it is just that breach. They struggle with that. And this is what this show is all about. It's to help everybody on board. The truth is, there's no platform that will discuss this. SABC 123E, it doesn't matter what it is. They don't have time for this because this will not make money. And secondly, it's not they don't worry about the church. And that's what I appreciate about this set. We can really, really discuss this and get into deeper stuff. If there's any questions out there, we are closing this show here today, the Inside Show. We're talking about the Phygital Church, and thank you so much for tuning in. It's time for me to sign out. I'll be on next Tuesday with Professor Ruben, and we're going to discuss this land issues. This guy I tell you, he's an incredible guy. There's a volume 1 and a volume 2 on humans, bastards or humans, a wonderful book to read. I do have it at my office. On this side, it's hard. You have to order it online, but I do have still stock in my office if you'd love to have that. And then there's 2 other books that I can't remember what it is about him, but you will meet him. He's a wonderful guy. And then the Wednesday, I was supposed to run the vaccine one, but I just making eye contact with my producer. I think we're going to get back here because we should do this in 4 weeks. There's the way too many questions. We can push the vaccine offset at another interview or so, but I think we should get back here next week and the week after that and just discuss this thing on the Phygital Church. It is a great concern, and we just want to assist and help for whatever is needed. Please come up with your views, positive or negative. It doesn't matter. We are open for every critique. Well, from my side, I'm signing out here. Thanking all my guests here today. A wonderful Wayne here, Pastor Wayne Chef here from Rhema North. And I would love to thank Pastor Paul Gonzalez here. Wonderful ministry just nearby. We stone throw away from one another. And also stone throw away another from Dr. Clarence. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you so much for being my guest here. From my side, I love you. God loves you best. And you have a super wonderful Tuesday. Take care. Goodbye. And thanks for now. Is it
Good morning, everybody. It is so good to have you here with me. Imagine if you have your vision as the car with the right team. Imagine how quick that vision will come into the footsteps. Something that was taking 5 years takes 3 months.
This morning is all about the leadership and influence.